fear used to mean something. It used to be unpredictable, uncomfortable, real. But somewhere along the way, fear changed. For the worse. It stopped being about scaring you and started to be about stimulating you. Because the goal isn't tension anymore. The goal, it's retention. You're not being scared. You're being studied. And the scariest part? Fear is now a business.
For 3 hours, the German heavy guns ranged on Verdun itself. At 7 in the morning, the bombardment switched to the French lines.
You know, for most of modern history, fear has always had a purpose. It warned you, protected you, it prepared you. Fear was a response to something real, something immediate. But somewhere along the way, fear stopped being a reaction, and it started becoming a product, a commodity, something packaged, optimized, and sold back to you, not to protect you, but to keep you watching. To understand this shift, we have to step back and look at how media itself changed. Not just horror, but the entire system that surrounds it. Because what we're seeing right now isn't the evolution of entertainment, it's the industrialization of attention. One line from the article we're using puts it, the 21st century is experiencing a fundamental transition in social communication paradigms, most often simplistically characterized as a shift from mass to social media. And that transition matters more than what people realize, because in the age of mass media, television, newspaper, radio, fear was, broadcasted outward. A horror movie scared you for like 2 hours, and then it ended. A news broadcast frightened you, but then it happened at a scheduled time. That experience had boundaries. However, social media removed those boundaries entirely. Now, fear isn't scheduled, it's ambient, always present, always waiting for you the second you unlock that goddamn phone. Because as the article continues, the advertising industry is undergoing a disruption as it struggles to adapt to the extraordinary opportunities that are now afforded for marketing over the internet. And that word opportunities is key, because fear online isn't just content, it's data. Every time you click on a horror video, every time you rewatch a jump scare, every time you pause on disturbing imagery, you are signaling interest, preference, engagement. And engagement is the currency of the digital economy. And as the article explains, and how advertising is used to function versus how it functions now, quote, traditional media advertising still counts audiences by looking at how many people watched a television program or bought a newspaper. Digital advertising, however, counts audiences on the basis of how many people have clicked on an ad. That shift sounds technical, but it changes everything. Old media measured exposure. New media measures behavior. Not what you saw, but what you did. Not whether the fear reached you, but whether it held you. And the fear holds attention better than almost anything else. It's primal, immediate, neurologically sticky. So when platforms optimize for engagement, they inevitably optimize for fear. Not because of some conspiracy, but because fear performs. And when fear performs, it gets scaled, mass-produced, systemized. Which leads to another critical point from the article. Advertising is now linked strategically to other dimensions of marketing and promotion, harnessing our ways of life to commercial purposes. Harnessing our ways of life. Think about that phrase carefully, because it does not just mean selling products. It means structuring environments around behavioral capture. Your feed isn't random. Your recommendations aren't neutral. They are calibrated ecosystems built to hold specifically you, and fear is one of the most effective anchors within that ecosystem. And here's where the horror genre specifically becomes relevant, not as the main subject, but as the most visible example. Horror used to be designed around tension, pacing, atmosphere. It wanted to scare you. Now, much of it is designed to stimulate you instead. As I said earlier, fast cuts, loud spikes, algorithm-friendly thumbnails, shock over suspense, because the goal isn't immersion anymore. It's retention, and retention feeds the machine, the algorithm. So instead of fear being crafted for emotional impact and quality, it's being engineered for engagement metrics. Why do you think Five Nights at Freddy's in the past few years, actually, it's been years, has been catered more to a broader audience, one that includes the younger, children? What about all these other thumbnails you're seeing on the internet? They're catered to stimulate you and grab your attention and keep it, rather than actually developing anything, worthwhile. So, instead of fear being crafted for emotional impact, it's engineered for engagement metrics, watch time, click-through rates, completion percentage, which raises a deeper question. If simulated fear is constantly occupying our emotional bandwidth, what happens to our real response to fear? When anxiety is channeled into safe, artificial experiences, does it dull our reaction to structural realities, to, surveillance, data extraction, to the commodification of our time itself? Because while we're busy reacting to fictional threats like Freddy jump scaring our face 15 times after attempting Ultimate Custom Night 50-20 mode, or any of these other, weird challenges, real systems are actually operating invisibly in the background. The article touches on this indirectly when it states, both the agencies and the new media alike are implicated in the issues around privacy, security, and surveillance raised by the algorithmic targeting of users for marketing purposes. Think about that for 1 second. Algorithmic targeting. That means your fears, your fascinations, your morbid curiosities are being mapped, categorized, sold. Not your money first, but your attention, your time. And time is the most finite resource you possess. And this is why this conversation shouldn't get stuck on horror as a genre. Horror is just the symptom, the visible layer, the aesthetic coating over a much larger structural shift. The real change is that media no longer simply entertains you, it studies you, adapts to you, feeds back into itself based on your reactions. And fear is one of its most reliable feedback loops, because fear interrupts comfort. It demands attention. It keeps you from scrolling past. So while it may feel like you're just consuming scary content casually, there is an infrastructure profiting from every single second you remain engaged. And that brings us back to the central point of this video. The business of fear isn't about scaring you anymore. It's about keeping you comfortable inside fear. Safe fear, predictable fear, consumable fear. Because as long as the fear remains simulated, it never disrupts the systems producing it. It only sustains them. And that's the shift we're analyzing. Not horror itself, but the machinery that learned fear could be monetized, scaled, and embedded into everyday digital life. So how are we going to understand why fear has evolved the way it has within modern media? The way we're seeing it today on YouTube, on even Netflix, every other social media platform that you have. Why is this happening? Well, first of all, you got to keep watching to find out. But if we do want to answer this question as quickly as possible, we need to look beyond the individual creators or franchises and instead examine the economic structure shaping production itself. Take, the trajectory of Five Nights at Freddy's, because we've talked about it a lot on this channel, and it's a good case study of how fear changes once it enters attention-driven digital ecosystems. Now, before we even get into this, by no means do I like Five Nights at Freddy's anymore. This game series has, by and large, shaped exactly what I'm talking about and has fallen victim to becoming more marketable than anything over the years. And you can distinctly see this change in every year since the original game came out, and this is exactly why we're looking at this. So, to begin, the earliest entries in the series were mechanically simple but psychologically deliberate. Especially when you look at the first game, movement was limited, sound design was sparse, and long stretches of silence forced players to sit with anticipation rather than react to constant stimulation. Fear emerged from uncertainty, from not knowing when something would happen or if it would happen at all. But as the franchise expanded, its relationship to fear began shifting, not necessarily because its creators abandoned tension as a design principle, but because the environment surrounding the franchise transformed. FNAF was no longer just a game being experienced privately, it became a part of a broader content infrastructure. Let's plays, reaction compilations, live streams, lore breakdowns, theory channels, yada yada yada, merchandise cycles, all feeding into algorithmic recommendation systems designed to maximize engagement. Why do you think FNAF became so popular? Because a lot of people were deciding to watch Five Nights at Freddy's content instead of the other horror content. Therefore, when they saw the people who were, like Scott Cawthon and all the YouTubers who were creating content for Five Nights at Freddy's, when they were seeing how profitable this became, they took advantage of this. And that's where this whole, FNAF boom, as we're going to call it, happened. Once fear entered that ecosystem, it stopped being consumed in isolation. It became a social, performative, and repeatable. Moments weren't just experienced, they were clipped, reacted to, and circulated. Just look at all the Markiplier Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare compilations out there. Yeah, they're super funny, however, it isn't about the fear anymore. The fear is secondary. And that circulation introduced new production incentives. Scenes that generated visible reactions, shock, panic, laughter, etc., traveled further through the platform algorithms than in slow psychological tension. Visual spectacle proved more engagement efficient than sustained dread. As a result, fear delivery began subtly aligning with platform economics, not disappearing, but adapting. Increasingly immediate, increasingly reactive, increasingly stimulation dense. And this isn't just purely artistic drift. It reflects the gravitational pull of attention economies shaping how fear is packaged once it becomes embedded within monetized digital systems. Just take a look at the jarring difference when you juxtapose Five Nights at Freddy's, let's say 4, with Security Breach or Secrets of the Mimic. It's not even close. One is like super dark. Whenever you play it, you're like always on edge, you're scared. It's perfect. And then the other, you're in the game, you're walking around, and it's a puzzle simulator with everything super well lit. Like, what is happening? What's the difference? And this pattern extends far beyond a single franchise. Across fear-based media more broadly, emotional pacing is increasingly influenced not only by narrative goals, but by engagement optimization models that determine what content survives algorithmic circulation. Fear is not anymore made so you can enjoy it. Fear is not something primal, innate anymore. It's something that is now used and capitalized on as an emotion that the media can twist to make you feel certain things so you can stay on it longer. This is exactly the reason that YouTube and all these social media platforms, or just media platforms in general, take advantage of. Instead of you paying them money, you are the product and you are the profit. We've talked about the system. We've talked about the business model. We've talked about why fear and stimulation are profitable. But the real question isn't just why this content exists, it's what it does to the people consuming it. Because platforms don't just distribute media, they shape behavior, they condition response, they train attention. And this is because simulated fear is different from real fear. It's safe, controlled, and it has an off switch. And you leave it unchanged. And because of that, it doesn't train confrontation, it trains consumption. Think about how people actually engage with horror content today. Like, take for example, yourself. You don't just play the game, you watch playthroughs, reaction compilations, jump scare montages, top 10 scariest moments, clips optimized for reaction instead of immersion. Fear isn't being experienced slowly anymore, it's binge consumed, stacked, looped, recommended for back to back by the algorithm. And viewers like you feel that shift psychologically. You see it in how people talk about horror now. Instead of saying something was disturbing, they say it wasn't scary enough. They need more intensity, more shock, more stimulation. That is desensitization in real time. The baseline for fear keeps rising because repeated exposure dulls response. This isn't theoretical. You can observe it directly in viewer behavior. People multitask while consuming horror. Second monitor open, phone in hand, chat scrolling. Fear becomes background noise. And when fear becomes background noise, it stops functioning as fear and it just becomes stimulation at that point. It's like those Family Guy clips you see on like the top half of a shorts feed, and then you have like just the rest of the actual content on the bottom. It's like the same thing. Even the body responds differently. Adrenaline spikes are shorter, recovery is faster. The nervous system recognizes the pattern and it knows that the fear isn't consequential, so it processes it as excitement, not threat. And over time, that changes emotional wiring. You start seeking fear the way you seek dopamine. You do not want atmosphere. You want reaction, immediate response, instant payoff. That is why jump scares dominate modern horror design. They're efficient, they spike engagement instantly, they generate streamer reactions instantly. But if we look psychologically, they do not linger, they do not provoke reflection, they produce reaction. And I want you to compare that with how people engage with media today. Not slowly, not deliberately, but constantly. Media isn't consumed in contained experiences anymore, it's consumed in streams. Endless feeds, back-to-back stimuli with no emotional processing time between them. You do not finish one piece of content and sit with it. You scroll almost immediately after finishing something. There's rarely a pause between one piece of media and to the next. Platforms are built to eliminate that pause entirely. Don't you see it? Autoplay cues for the next video, feeds refresh endlessly, recommendations are positioned before you can even decide to keep watching. Consumption becomes continuous rather than deliberate. You're not exiting media experiences anymore, you're moving laterally with them. And that structural shift affects attention over time, not because viewers are less disciplined, but because the environment is engineered to reduce friction. Stopping requires effort, and continuing doesn't. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that modern media systems are no longer neutral delivery mechanisms. They don't just distribute content, they shape how content is experienced, how it's prioritized, how long it holds attention, and ultimately how audiences engage with the world around them. fear, stimulation, tension, whatever from it takes, is no longer valuable solely because of its meaning. It's valuable because of its performance, how long it retains you, how predictably it engages you, how effectively it can be measured, optimized, and circulated. That shift changes production, it changes distribution, and over time it changes consumption behavior as well. Not through coercion, but through conditioning. Gradual, data-driven adjustment to how attention is captured and sustained. Platforms don't need viewers to think about these systems. They function more efficiently when they aren't noticed, when consumption feels natural, when continuation feels automatic. But once you recognize the structure behind it, media stops feeling passive. You begin to see pacing decisions differently, recommendation chains differently. You start noticing how often you're being guided rather than choosing, how rarely media environments allow disengagement without resistance, how attention itself has become the primary commodity being extracted. And that awareness doesn't require abandoning media, it just reframes the relationship. You're no longer only consuming content, you're participating in systems designed to retain you. Which brings the conversation back to the central thesis. The business of fear, and the stimulation more broadly, isn't just about the emotional reaction, it's about the behavioral retention, attention extraction, and the monetization of engagement states that keep audiences circulating within platform ecosystems. Understanding that doesn't eliminate the system, but it changes how consciously you move within it. In an environment engineered around passive continuation, conscious engagement becomes one of the few remaining forms of agency. Thank you for watching and subscribe.